doing really well. We're probably about halfway now through you getting a finished and well-polished personal statement. But we need to address one subject, which is probably the most tricky part of the personal statement, and that is the opening line. Now, personally, even I still struggle with this. At the moment of filming, I'm currently applying to a diploma in dermatology, and I'm having to write a personal statement, and even I find it difficult. The first line is usually the hardest part. And the reason it's so tricky with the opening and closing lines is because you want to make an impression, but without making some obvious cliches that everyone says. There are only a certain amount of things that you can say for a reason for wanting to do medicine, and it's so hard to avoid these cliches, but at the same time give a rational and reasonable reason for why you want to get involved with a career and take on the degree and ultimately become a doctor. So our aim here is to put our reason why across in an impactful way without avoiding the obvious cliches. And that's because really there are nothing wrong with the cliches. There are cliches for a reason, and it's because they've been overused and because people just recognize them as they've seen them a million times. And having a cliche doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be invited to interview. But as you'll see in one of the live sessions, when you see a cliche or when you see something, it's just really, the reader sees it as a bit cringeworthy. And really it's that, as I'm reading it, I get that internal kind of like that eye roll moment that really doesn't write off the rest of the personal statement and doesn't ruin your chances of being invited to interview, but it just gets off on the wrong foot. For example, the classic cliches of things are, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor. Really? Is that really what as long as you can remember, you wanted to be a doctor? Because I don't think anybody who, as long as they can, because when I was 4, when it was probably my first memory, I probably wanted to be a fireman or something, not very unlikely that I wanted to be a doctor, and have sustained that all the way till now. The other thing is, the love of people and the love of science. That's incorrect. There are several jobs that combine people and science. So don't fall into that trap, because really it shows a bit of a lack of understanding of what the job involves, or maybe just a lack of a bit of peripheral research around other jobs. It kind of gives the impression that you've just, picked at random. Medicine, what does that involve? People and science, okay, let's say that, because there are lots of other jobs that combine that. And really by writing that, you're already inviting those other questions of like, well, what about nursing? Have you not considered nursing? Those questions are tricky to answer at interview at the best of times, but when they come up with things and suggestions for jobs that you hadn't even thought of because they've picked up on this love of science and love of people, and they can think of obscure things, it kind of backs you into a corner. So let's just avoid those cliches to avoid the traps that we can fall into by saying rubbish and unimaginative opening lines. So the antidote to these cliche opening lines, and to come up with something that's original, it goes back, I know I keep banging on about this, but know your why. If you know your why, the cure is to have an opening line that is personal to you. And the more genuine it is, the more it will come across in the paper, the more it will just flow naturally and be something that is authentic and that it shows in the way that it's written by being personal to you. And when you do that, it avoids that cringe factor, like we were saying, and saves you from that eye roll moment of the person reading your personal statement thinking, really? The problem with the opening line is that it's usually where people start, and it creates that writer's block to get people going. Now, I have referred to this in other videos as to how to avoid writer's block. There's something called writing for the bin, or writing for the waste bin, which means that you essentially, a lot of authors do this. They write thinking, well, I'm just going to throw this away. But it just gets the creative juices flowing, it gets them writing, and hopefully, whilst they're writing, something good will come out. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said, you just get to the table, write, and hopefully something good will come out that you can actually keep. Whereas, for example, Ernest Hemingway used to say, write drunk, edit sober. Now, I'm not recommending that you do this, but the point was that Hemingway was known to be a rife alcoholic. Again, I'm not recommending this, but what he used to do, it was remove his block, and he wrote and wrote and wrote, and then he would edit sober in the morning, because it just removed his block and just made sure that he just got into the flow of writing. Now, there are obviously much better ways to do this, and really just getting going and starting writing will get your pen moving, get your creative juices flowing, and then maybe after a few lines, after you've thrown a few in the bin, you'll come across some gold. So just get going with it. And another way, this is not really related to the opening line, but another way to avoid writer's block is to just start with something you're comfortable with. Start with your extracurricular activities, or an experience that you had on your work experience. These are all good things that are kind of easy to talk about because they're from your memory, you lived and breathed them, and it just gets you going. And then you might stumble across a really golden opening and closing line. Another part is obviously when we were talking about the gathering information stage, if you have a great little line that came across you while you're walking about and you've captured on your notes on your phone, then that's obviously increases your chances massively of you stumbling across something that's an absolute winner that you'll definitely want to have for your personal statement. So with all of that, there are a couple of little techniques that we can use to get you started with an opening line. And there are two main ones, one being the epiphany and the other being the first exposure and the kind of path that led you to want to apply to medicine. Now the epiphany one's a tricky one because unless you have something really genuine, and again you can tell it without sounding like it's the story to a film, and again upping that cringeworthy factor, if you have a real good epiphany and a good story as to that moment when you decided you wanted to be a doctor, that is one place to start with your opening line. On the other hand, you could always do the narrative of what led you to be here. And I think that's a much more genuine way of doing it. It usually involves some sort of childhood experience that first piqued your interest with medicine. And then the piqued interest led you to learn more about it. And the more you learned, the more you enjoyed. And the more you enjoyed, the more you tried to seek more out and learned. And then you carried on this virtuous cycle, which led you to where you are today, to applying to medical school. And I think this method works really nicely because it weaves a narrative that can go immediately from your kind of why and what led you to think about medicine and consider it. And then when you did your further research to research the role and get some experience in it, that leads nicely into your work experience. What you learned from that helped you realize you want to do it more, and it taught you something which would make you a good doctor. That prompted you to want to do more work experience or more volunteering or gain exposure in another way. And that, like I say, that virtuous circle becomes nicely weaved into the narrative as you go through your personal statement and explain how one thing led to another. And with your closing line, if you can summarize nicely all the things that have happened in your life that have led you to this moment to applying, and then finish with a punchy line about why you're sure that you'd be a great doctor, that's a really nice and strong way to end your personal statement. So there are some ideas about the opening and closing lines. Like I say, the take-home message is just make sure that you understand why and that it's personal to you. So really now we should have the makings of a personal statement. So now we'll talk about what you do once you've got your first draft and the review process as to how to tighten it up, get that icing, and then finally the cherry on top.